Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show, where we go across country and travel the world with members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. You know, every third Monday, we go around the world and across the country with IFWTWA travel writers. And today we're going to Mallorca, Spain, which I always thought it was Mallorca, but I listened to the Amateur Traveler podcast. Chris Christensen is here, and I encourage you to go to his website, amateurtraveler.com. And he's joining us to talk about going to Mallorca, Spain, which what I learned from your site and your blogs and also the podcast that you have up on there, this is like now get going, like for January, February would be an ideal time. So I'm excited to chat with you. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
Thanks. I'm good. Thanks. Yeah, a lot of the tourism that Mallorca has gotten historically has been summer, has been beach travel. It has been, package tourism. So it's one of the spots in Spain that has gotten protests for over tourism. But if you go, I was there in November, you can go in, it's lovely and all year round. It's a little warmer and a little more crowded in the summertime. So if you're going for the beaches, go in the summer, but it's a beautiful island to go other times of the year as well.
It seems like there's a lot of history that people can experience and
Sure, yeah.
a lot of culture. I mean, this is some ancient history that you got to experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, Majorca was a Roman island way back in the day, so it's been inhabited for certainly more than 2,000 years, and there
Mm.
are Roman ruins on the island. Obviously, it was controlled by the Moors also for hundreds of years, and so there's the Moorish history as well, and then the history of the Reconquest and everything after. So,
Oh, that's cool. What led you to go? What
well,
made you
I
say,
was
"Oh,
there on
I
a
want
press
to do
trip.
this"? Yeah, but even still, you still make a choice.
Yeah, I do have
So,
to make
yeah.
a choice. But Visit Spain invited me and five other uh, writers. Actually, it was a podcaster press trip, is what was the focus
Oh,
of it.
cool.
And
Cool.
so to come to Mallorca off season, to talk about different things that you can do there, more of the cultural experience, a little more of the
Mm.
luxury experience than they're
Oh,
known for. Why I said yes was I had been to Mallorca just briefly. I'd been there on a cruise, which is
okay.
quite typical with a lot of people, and which meant that I had done, the downtown of the main city in Mallorca, and then I had done the caves there, the caves of Drach,
Mm.
and that was all I had seen. So all I had seen is Palma de Mallorca and the caves, and so I was sure there was more to see than that, and so it was always wonderful to get an opportunity to spend a little more time in the island. So we spent, I think it was about 6 nights on the island when we were there, and went all over
Oh.
as one does on a press trip. When one sees
It's
things
like a
usually at,
whirlwind.
yeah, usually at about twice the speed that you really want to be traveling personally, but it's a
Mm.
wonderful opportunity to try things out and to see different parts of the island. So we were all over. We were
Yeah.
on the north shore, the west shore, the Palma, which is in the south shore. We did a really interesting and unusual experience, which was biking in the water, with
That's what I was dying to ask you about this. I was like, I saw on your podcast and on your blog on it,
right.
the salty cycling. Is that what it's called?
Salty cycling, and this was a challenging experience. It's really something that is quite athletic, where it's a funny thing. If you picture in your mind something that looks kind of like a fitness cycle,
Yeah.
but now you put it in the water and it's floating, and you have to get on it, start cycling, and it's like an electric bike. So basically, once you start cycling, the motor will then kick in, and then the way it's supposed to work, and the way it works when the guides try it, is you start pedaling, and then you rise out of the water on a hydrofoil. And basically, they would get to the point where they're mostly out of the water and they're on a hydrofoil and they're pedaling, and you can go for miles. For those of us who were quite new at it, we did not have quite as much success, because it takes quite a lot of balancing. For instance, just to
Yeah.
even, you have to lean forward, for instance, at first when you're getting out of the water, and then you have to sort of settle back. And I think with mine, I also may have been a little underpowered, or either that, or a little too gravitationally challenged to get all the way out of the water. But it was an
Yeah.
interesting experience. It was quite a workout too. But Majorca is quite popular with cyclists in the off season. Not so much in summer
Mm.
because it's quite warm. It's quite hot in the summertime. But basically, once you get into the fall, there's a lot of cycling that is done in the island, and so the people who do salty cycling are cyclists. They basically got these bikes. They didn't invent them. They're from a New Zealand company, but they really
Oh,
want to turn this into another sport opportunity in Majorca for especially the cyclists who are there in the fall, spring, and winter time.
that sounds, interesting to me because I know that cycling is part of that route towards sustainability. And I think
Right.
America is
Mhm.
still learning this part of it. We're getting there, but Europe claimed it before us about cycling and walking more. So do you think Majorca has a little bit of they're working towards that on in regards to especially being an island, being a little bit,
Sure.
more responsible than maybe other destinations and
Yeah, I don't
necessary.
know if they're more or less responsible,
Hmm.
but everybody's sort of thinking about sustainability.
Yeah.
One of the issues they have on Majorca, especially relative to sustainability, is just water.
Mm.
Basically, when you're in Majorca, even with the regular population, they're doing desalination to get enough water because there are no permanent
Wow.
rivers in Majorca. There
Mm.
are some what we would call arroyos in, out in the port of the world where I live, what they call torrents, which is a misleading term because they're usually dry. They're dry most of the year round, and then basically when the rains come, they fill up with water, but then quickly drain away. So because of that, you have to have the desalination to be able to supply enough water, even just for the locals, let alone the number of tourists that they get, because it is quite a big tourist destination.
Yeah, I know popular with a lot of movie stars, right? And famous people, especially on,
Yes,
on the
we
yacht.
we're in the region where Michael Douglas and has his house. He and oh, what is his wife's name? She is also famous, but I'm drawing a blank right now.
Catherine
Yeah,
Zeta-Jones.
Catherine Zeta-Jones, exactly.
Yeah.
So they are in the west part of the island, and unless you get an invitation, they're off a side of a cliff, so you wouldn't even see their house from the road.
Wow.
But you're in an area there that uh, has olive trees rather going back for hundreds or even 1,000 years. These olive trees that are, if you think about a regular olive grove and how
Mhm.
wide or trunk of a tree might be, you think of inches, but these are maybe, oh gosh, at least 2 feet in diameter and
Oh,
gnarled
wow.
beyond
Oh,
recognition.
that's
Just
cool. That's kind of when
beautiful.
you see
Mhm.
grapevines that have been that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that ancient. We saw that once in South Africa, this one of the oldest grapevines. Like it was like this gnarly tree in a way. It became like a tree, this huge trunk. And we're like, what? But yeah, that was amazing. But I was a kid. I wasn't allowed to drink wine at that time. Now, if I was
Got it.
there, well, later I was, and it was fun. But going back to that with the olive trees and yes, celebrities, let them have some peace from the paparazzi. Come on.
Yes.
I think there's just a little craziness that we have, but these olive trees, does this lend itself to like, okay, you're going to have good food if they've got this,
Th-
these
there
ancient
was a good food
trees and
scene. There
yeah.
really has been a push on the island to have more of a luxury experience available in addition
Mm,
to they still have the budget beach excursions that you can get to the island, but there are numerous four-star hotels and Michelin star restaurants. And we did a wonderful opportunity when we were in Palma. We did a food cooking class with someone that is basically
cool.
it's done in English, so it's targeting tourists. But the option that we did was local cuisine. So we were cooking paella and some of the other local
Ooh.
dishes. And it's really funny because we walked in and there was another group. They had an old mill, a historic mill that in the base of the mill are these two different rooms that have fully equipped kitchens and room for
Oh,
two
cool.
different groups to be cooking at the same time. And we walked through the first group and they were having a great time. And we just assumed that they, like us, were people who the group knew each other, and our uh, instructor said, no, they're strangers. It's a group of strangers. But The wine is flowing, the cooking is happening, and
Oh,
by the end
yay.
of the evening, they were not strangers. But it was quite an interesting experience to be able to learn how to cook the food from someone who knew how to do it. But it was also just a real fun experience. I have not been someone who has leaned into cooking classes in different places that I go, but I'd have to say that I may have to change that stance after this experience there. But yeah,
Yeah.
quite a good food scene there. Obviously, they're known for their seafood, which isn't too surprising. But even someone like me who's not as much of a seafood fan, you can find plenty of things to eat there that are not seafood. But Spain eats more seafood than any other country in
Oh,
Europe.
wow.
And Majorca being an island, there's quite a lot of fresh seafood available.
Is it kind of like a healthy destination? I look at what's going on with this blue zone movement across the country here, getting people to eat more of like a Mediterranean diet and use olive oil, healthy oils, and all of that kind of stuff. Like, eat blue plates. It used to be the blue plate special when you're retired and going to the buffet, you know, but
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
changed a bit.
Mediterranean
Did
is
you feel that?
certainly,
Yeah.
Mediterranean diet sort of place that is where you are here, and they do grow, as we said, olives on the island.
That's
We
cool.
stopped at an olive production farm there that's doing things a little differently than the normal olive production. Normally, I don't know if you've been to an olive
Hmm.
farm, as it were. This would
Hmm.
be a fika is what they call it there, but they're doing more modern techniques where they're using centrifuges to separate the olive oil instead of using an olive press. But
Oh,
still,
wow.
lots of different olives grows on the island, and have been, as I said, for at least 1,000 years. I'm sure the Romans had olive groves there as well, but those are not in existence anymore. The specific ones that the Romans
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
but yeah,
Oh,
so
man.
you can certainly find that sort of food. You can have a healthy experience if that's what you're looking for in the island. I suspect not everybody who's there for the summer beach holiday is targeting that kind of experience, but that is certainly available if that's what you're looking for.
Well, when for people maybe listening now, it's December, and I know people listen to this
Hmm.
our shows, whenever they want to. It's an on-demand
Sure.
life, right? But those who may be thinking, "Hey, the snow's coming already. Let's get the heck out. Let's go there for January, February, right? Because that's when the coldest time is in our country."
Right.
What do you think the weather would be like over there for them?
Well, their weather is a Mediterranean climate, so it'd be similar to coming where I live in California, for instance.
Nice.
So you're not talking about, Palma wouldn't get snow. Now they do have mountains, and you're going to get snow up in the mountains of Palma. I was well, Palma, sorry, of Mallorca, but not down in the valleys or not at the coastlines. And so it's going to be, I would say, probably a summer day there is going to be in the 50s Fahrenheit.
Nice.
Not bad at all. Not,
Mm.
not beach weather, but still lovely. You're going to get more of your rains in the in the wintertime, but they don't get a lot of rain in the island. It's a fairly dry island.
I always like it where people have an opportunity to go off season as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you go in summer, it's just going to be kind of crazy, and people get agitated when there's too many people in one spot. And
Right.
I think
Right.
for the destinations, it's better when people come off season. Gives kind of
Yeah.
a
We
breathing
did a couple
space,
things, for instance, that I think we would enjoy. So, for instance, we did not go when I was there to the caves. And one of the reasons we didn't go to the caves is they get pretty crowded in the tourist season. So I've been there in August, well, on the
Mm,
cruise, which is not really my favorite time of year to go to Spain or even to Europe, unless you're going to Northern Europe, because it is quite crowded and it is quite hot. And I would say the crowds in the caves at that time of year were probably twice as much as I would have liked. I would have
mm,
appreciated if they had limited the number of tourists there. If you go there in the wintertime, though, you can go and the caves are going to be the same, right? The weather doesn't
exactly.
really impact
Yeah.
this experience of, you basically go into a cave and get an underground concert
So
and then an
cool.
underground river experience, and you would enjoy that much more in the wintertime. So if you had a rainy day, for instance, in the wintertime, it'd be a perfect, experience to do because it doesn't matter that it's raining, you're underground. And,
I
it
see.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter how cool it is because it's always going to be a little cooler, down below. So,
Mm.
you know,
What
s-
other attractions would you say to do in the winter season? Because I know that you went to some cathedrals, gardens,
sure.
like gardens where you could see the Merce gardens in the States. Like that would be my thing. I want that. I want to go to
Yeah,
the
so
gardens.
some of the things that we did, for instance, like the cathedral, obviously you could do that any time of year, it doesn't matter the weather, although it's nicer to do it on a day when it's not raining because one of the things unusual about the Palma de Mallorca Cathedral, which is behind you, for
I
those
know.
of you
I got to move for
on the
everybody. There
video
you
there,
go.
yeah, it's quite a large cathedral. You can get up on the roof of that. So if you've ever been in a
Wow.
cathedral, it's very odd that when you're in the Palma Cathedral and you're looking up at the big rose window of this big Gothic cathedral,
Mm.
which was, at one time, I think it's the one of used to be the third largest Christian church in the world. It's quite large. It's quite
Mm.
voluminous inside. For one reason, they built it around the mosque that was there. They used the mosque after the Reconquest in the late 1400s to have their services in while they built the cathedral around it. And eventually, when they had roof covering over the old mosque, they took it down. So it's large and cavernous inside.
Wow.
But when you look up at the big rose window, there's one on each end. You'll see people walking by on the outside. You'll see the shadows of people because you can hike up basically the stairs to that level of the roof,
I
and
see what you
you're
mean.
you're there underneath the flying buttresses, and you can walk past the rose window. And actually, at one time of day, and I think it's in the spring solstice, spring equinox rather, that the two different rose windows kind of line up with the sun so that you get the
Oh, yeah.
display of the one rose window on the wall of the other rose window. And they were showing us pictures of that, but it wasn't when we were there. But it's off season. It's as I recall, in the spring that happens. So
They build a lot of the like missions and cathedrals
mhm.
with that in mind. There's some that
Right.
I've been to where it's like, okay, on this day, like winter solstice, not far from you in San Jose, I think it's San Juan Bautista, California.
I
The
know
mission
San
there,
Juan Bautista. Well, I grew up right
it,
by San Juan
I
Bautista. So.
love it. I love it there. But that mission, I think it's that mission. I may be wrong. It's that or Oceanside, California. I think it's winter solstice. They have like it was built so that the light would come in and go right down between the pews.
I don't remember that, but it,
There's
it certainly
something
could be the
about that.
case. The one thing
Yeah.
they did with that mission that they probably shouldn't have done in hindsight is they also built it like 20 feet from the San Andreas Fault.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Well, that
it's
whole area has a geological. Well, Pinnacles National Park is there because of
sure,
it. But
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, really. Well, that's why they filmed Vertigo, right? There, 'cause it was like woo. But yeah, they filmed Vertigo right across the lawn at the plaza and at the San Juan Bautista mission,
I
which
didn't
was
remember it was
interesting.
that mission.
Yeah, that mission, and it's all part of San Juan Bautista National Historical Park. It's a
It's
trip.
a
It's
yeah, it's a
a cool
great park. I
place.
love I love San Juan Bautista because, and for those of you who don't know what Lisa's talking about, there
Yeah.
are still the livery stables and the hotels and a
Yes,
collection
the
of
plaza. Hmm.
carriages. The plaza there, it's a fun little preserved historic town. The old jail is there still, and no, I love San Juan Bautista. I used to
And
go on field
have
trips there as a kid because I grew up in Salinas,
yeah.
just south of
Oh
there.
wow, well, Salinas. Yeah, you're really connected.
Yeah,
Steinbeck land. I mean, talk about a travel
exactly.
writer, right?
Yeah,
That
Steinbeck and
just
I went to the same high school. Not
no way.
not
That's
not
cool.
together, not at the same
Yeah.
time. So
Well, his grandfather and grandmother lived in Hollister, which is just around the corner
got it.
from San
Okay.
Juan Bautista. And then one of the oh, I'm going to mess it up. I don't want to say what. Oh, I can't remember the movie, but one of the houses in a movie of his writing is there. But
Okay.
he's got
I don't know which one
artifacts
that
of
would
his
be.
family in Hollister in the museum in downtown Hollister, which is pretty cool.
Well,
But
and now
that's
there's the
nice.
the large Steinbeck Center in Salinas, which I am
Yeah.
embarrassed to say I've never been to. That was
Ah,
built after I moved away from Salinas. I didn't move far enough away, so I don't have a good excuse. But that they used to have the Steinbeck Library in town where they had some of his artifacts, but now those are all at the Steinbeck Center down
did
on
he
Main
ever
Street.
influence you growing up in that region as a
No, I didn't
travel
actually
writer?
read a lot of Steinbeck. So and by training, I actually am not a travel writer. I'm a nerd. I live up in Silicon Valley because I was a
Yeah.
Silicon Valley engineer for 43 years. So in fact, when I started Amateur Traveler, I was a VP of engineering and operations for a small startup company that was
You
running,
needed to travel. I'm just
yeah,
gonna
running
say if
online
you're doing
communities
that.
for all sorts of places. So
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, I got into this and it kind of sideways, but
That's cool. But that I think that's we all need that other outlet. It kind
yeah.
of balances our brain, right? If we're really able to geek out on certain things, we need to ungeek on a different, like the polar opposite, right? I kind of feel that. But and speaking of that, going back to San Juan Bautista and all of that Spanish history,
Okay.
going to Mallorca, right? Because
Yep.
I'm not going to say Mallorca. I'm going to be good.
Notice
But going to
that double L.
that double L or J, some of them people put
Yep.
J's. Going there and seeing the architecture, did you feel kind of connected with some of the Spanish history of California because it's all over? I mean,
Well,
obviously
so
different,
it's
right?
a
But
different era. So
yeah.
all of the missions in California, for instance, are built around the time of the founding of the U.S.
Hmm.
Not the founding, but the founding of the country. So, for instance, the mission Dolores in San Francisco is 1776, and that's the latest, one of the latest of the missions. I think the Sonoma mission is the only one, and
Oh.
San Rafael are the two that were built after it. But so they're all built roughly in that time period and a little
Hmm.
before then, where when you're seeing things in Majorca, basically Palma became the capital when the Moors conquested the island. So
Hmm.
the old Roman capital's on the north end of the island, and if you think about a map, Majorca, if you go north, you get France, which was then Gaul in Roman times, and the north end of the island was closer to Rome. It was closer to the Roman Empire, and so when the Moors take over in the gosh, I want to say the 1300s, but I'm
Yeah.
drawing a blank off the top of my head when they actually came to the island, because it was earlier in the mainland, but I don't remember when they took over the island. They moved the capital then to Palma, which faces down towards southern Spain and towards North Africa. And
Mm.
so it was closer to their empire. And so it's more like when you're in some of these, Moorish cities, it's a little closer in some ways. It feels like being in Morocco.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because
In
that to
fact,
me, yeah.
we went to the one of the old ranches there that was founded around the time of the Reconquest in the 1500s, I want to say. And it reminded me especially of Morocco and especially southern Morocco or southern Spain, Granada and those sort of things. You have a very the you mentioned the gardens that we went
Hmm.
to. Those are very much in that style of a Moorish garden.
Mm.
That's the kind of thing that you would find if you were in the Alhambra, for instance, in Granada. And this is the Alfabia gardens just outside of Palma. And
Mm.
they're from that kind of time period, and so they really do have a Moorish
Mm.
blend as well as kind of into the Renaissance and Baroque in terms of the house itself. But I get more of that kind of connection when I'm in,
That's
someplace
cool.
like Palma. So,
Mm. I That's kind of my style personally. I grew up in Africa, so I grew up in Kenya and South Africa, and
oh, okay.
so it's always this interesting balance because there was
Yep.
Spanish, there was German, there was Dutch, obviously, right? And that also connected in a weird. It's just it's in it. I mean, we are the blend for a reason because everything does connect back to each other in some way. That's
Uh,
why I was going like when the ties back to Spain's history in California was more in the 1776, I think, is when De Anza did this. Juan Batista de Anza did his expedition
just a
from
little
Mexico.
before that.
Yeah, and he
I
got.
want
I
to I
mean, it
want to
was a
say
Presidio.
1750s, but I'm doing it off the top of my head. So,
Well, his dad started it, and then he came in
yeah,
after him and took after him. And I mean, here we were going through like, the becoming of America, and there
right,
Spain was coming in and going, "Hey, no, we're coming." It was so
right.
interesting this cycle, and we had the French in the middle part and all that. And yeah, anyway, that's a whole other story. but Spain at the same time with, and I think it was in the 1500s. Oh, I'm going to get myself in trouble. So everyone, you can email and yell at me. But it was when Sir Francis Drake was doing his big circumnavigation thing around the world and ended up in right outside Point Reyes National Seashore,
Yep.
and it is Golden Hiney, as I say. And I was talking about this with travel writer Joe Clark just on the other podcast the other day, IFWTWA podcast. He landed there, and it was pretty much close to Marin County more, in
Sure.
that area,
It is
and
now Marin
San
County. Yeah.
Rafael, yeah. And
Drake's Bay
Drake's,
is
yeah,
in
Drake's
part of
Estero, and
Point
yeah,
Reyes National Seashore. Yeah.
and he landed,
So
and then
Sir
that
Francis
got,
Drake, you're talking about the
yeah,
time of Elizabeth the First
yes,
of England, and so
yes.
you're in the late 1500s at
Okay,
that
so I'm
point.
not 100% off then. Okay, I was like, I knew it was in the 15 somethings, and he landed when he wanted to claim California as Alba Nuevo, I think it was called, as a new thing, and it didn't work. And then he went off and fought
Well,
the
it didn't
Spanish.
work because they didn't really. You can't really claim someplace until you have a presence there,
I
which is the
know they
reason
didn't.
why the Spanish were building their missions, is they were basically trying to solidify their claim to California. They
Mm.
had certainly explored it before the other Europeans, but they didn't have a presence there until they built the missions and the presidios and
That's what's
brought
so
in the
cool,
colonists. Yeah,
interesting to me about him and the Spanish.
yeah.
They were having intense wars, and he would just he almost
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
claim everything just to annoy the Spanish. It was just anything he
Well,
could do.
he was also looting treasure ships and setting fire to
Yes,
cities and things. He was
he was a pirate. Like
well, he
no
was a
one looks at him as
privateer
that.
technically,
Okay, a
which is the
privateer.
same thing except you have letters of marque. You have
Yes,
official permission to be a pirate because you're working as a de facto representative of your country.
Jean Lafitte in Louisiana,
Well, he was a pirate
but
who
helped.
then fought with the Americans against the British in the War of 1812. Yeah, in
So did the Native Americans. Wasn't that crazy?
1815.
How
Yeah.
they all came together under Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans still blows my mind.
Yeah.
How that all happened. But anyway, we've gone off
That
path.
happened a month after the end of the war
See, it's wild. It's
in
wild.
the Battle of New Orleans. We're jumping around here a little bit.
I know, but it's cool. But this it's all connected. For you when you
Yep.
travel, do you like to
So
dig up what's going
I
on
am a
in
history
history?
lover. So
Okay, I'm
you may
glad you're
have
here
gathered
then.
that from the last 15 minutes of the
Yeah,
conversation.
I'm really glad because you're fixing everything for me. It's great.
So yeah, so I love the history of places and love learning about the history
Mm,
and how the different things connect. So yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
That's why I was going to say, like going from California to, Mallorca or anywhere in Spain, it's kind of like,
Mhm.
I'd be kind of like, oh, look how it was here at this point, and now we have it over here, like
Right.
a few years later, quite a few
Yeah,
years
the
later. But
most recent podcast on the Amateur Traveler podcast that I just did, we talk about Cáceres and Extremadura,
oh,
and one of the places we talk about is the monastery where and it's in that port of Spain in Extremadura where Ferdinand and Isabella meet Columbus.
oh, no
And
way.
they basically, it's there that he gets his commission to go explore the New World. And a lot of the palaces in Cáceres rather, are built by the conquistadors, who
Oh,
basically take the treasures of the New World and they come back to Extremadura and they build their palaces. And so this is it kind of it all
yeah,
connects right there in Spain, and it has obviously very deep connections with the New World.
it's
But a
amazing.
lot of
That's
that for Spain wouldn't be from Majorca. They would be down from Sevilla,
mm.
where the ships leave from, or Extremadura, where the conquistadors, a lot of them are from. But you always have those connections around.
Do you like maps? I kind of feel like you like
Love
maps.
maps. Love
Ah,
maps.
okay, you're a friend. You're a friend because you can't get it until you get the map out.
Yep. Yep.
You made me go look on the maps. I'm like, we're going to Mallorca. This is so cool. Let's go. Because it's like, all right, where exactly is it and what happened
Yep.
and where a place is, it determines okay, how it is used in battle, how it is used, for
Sure.
food, all of that in the world. So I want to know from you go from this engineering background and you're in the
Yep.
geek land. We love the geek world. Thank God for geeks, and some geeks not so much, but thank God for most of them. How did you land up into the world of, hey, I am going to do travel writing and podcasting? Did blogging come first? Podcasting?
No,
What? How
podcasting,
did it?
well, sort of. I was a blogger in 2004, but not necessarily um, about travel. There was some travel in there because I was doing traveling, but I was just doing generic blogging in 2004. But basically, podcasting starts in September of 2004. I started listing in around December of 2004 when a tech show that I was doing became a podcast. It's like, we're going to be a
Oh,
podcast.
wow.
We're like, okay, what's a podcast? We all have our what's our podcast moment. Mine was that early, and so I thought I wanted to do a show. I thought about doing a geek show, a tech show, but a fellow named Adam Christensen, not to be confused with Chris Christensen, was already doing the Mac cast, and I thought, oh, well, we don't need another Mac show, and I was a Mac guy,
Mm.
and of course there are many more than one now. And then I thought about doing a religious show, which I actually did do about a year later, but then we had some friends over for a Memorial Day picnic in 2005, and all the best stories were travel stories. And I said, I'm going to start a podcast about my travels, which
Oh.
is how it started, but it hasn't been that way for, 19 years. Basically, it changed very quickly into predominantly an interview show, like
Hmm.
this format, because I was traveling 4 weeks a year and podcasting 48 weeks a year, and the math just doesn't work to talk about your own travel stories. And so we started having people on talking about different destinations, some that I'd been to and many that I hadn't, some that I may never get to, because we've talked about, pretty much all over the world at this point.
Yeah, you have a lot of fellow IFTWA writers on there, and I
Sure.
know that
Yeah.
you've got, a lot
Not
of
not just
storytellers
IFTWA,
too,
but yeah,
all
other
over,
travel
all different.
writers and yeah, bloggers and podcasters. Yeah, exactly.
So, where's next for you?
Well, I have some domestic travel. Well, I'm going to on Orlando in January to get inducted into the Podcasting Hall of Fame, for instance. But
Right
my
on.
next international trip is Cuba. I'm taking a group of listeners of the show to Cuba in February, so that
That's
should be great
awesome.
fun. We've done trips with listeners of the show going back as far as 2010.
Wow. So now
And
you're a travel advisor too, like
well, sort
you
of,
know,
but it's a very odd thing. I basically let people vote on where I go on vacation once a year, which seems very strange when you say it that way, especially when I was working full time and only had a few precious weeks of vacation that I would use 10 days of that for, and then let people say where I should go was kind of odd, but I do that.
I know we had it at one point going, I really wanted to do just throw the dart at the map.
Yeah.
And that was kind of dumb. But, I wanted to do it that way, just kind of free, just go for it. But it doesn't work that way, especially when I started finding out what it's like to travel to the Midwest in winter.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
You just need to improve your aim with the dart. That's really what
I
you need
know.
at that point.
No, I was going to do it in a bar. That's a bad story, right?
That's
That's a,
yeah.
yeah, that was like wherever we were, I was going to have someone else do it. And then, but it didn't work that way, but it's all good. So you joined in the International Food Wine Travel Writers
Mhm.
Association about a year or so ago. What,
Right.
yeah, and you joined different associations. You've won all kinds of awards. So that's part of it, right? In doing what you do is as a travel writer, blogger, podcaster,
Mhm.
as being part of those associations. What led you to join them?
Well, one of the things I liked about IFTWA, which is funny
I
to
know it's a
say,
fun mouthful. Yeah.
every time I go to spell it, I have to sound it out of my head. I have to do all the, international food wine travel. Okay, now I know how to write it down. I joined it because it's a relatively small group, but I thought that for its size, it was kind of punching above its weight class in terms of how many different press trips it was doing and how
Mm,
active it was. So it was one of the things that attracted me to that particular
mhm.
group was basically all the different things they were doing. Not that I have made it to their conference yet. I was still doing a full-time job when they had the last conference, and then I think I have a conflict with the one they're doing next in the
Oh,
Finger Lakes.
Lafayette. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
they did.
Lafayette. Right, that's
Yeah,
right.
they just did Finger Lakes,
Just
and
did the
then
Finger
now
Lakes.
Lafayette. I know the Lafayette one. I want to do Lafayette so bad because they have Zydeco breakfast. That's in the
I
history.
missed the T-Bex conference also when it was Lafayette, so I need to get down to Lafayette sometime. But
Yeah, yeah, it's good. I mean, Louisiana, the history of Louisiana is. Have you traveled through Louisiana?
sure, yeah, I was there, but I've been there a couple times in for a different conference, not IFWTWA years ago, and then also just family travels down to New Orleans and in the
Mhm.
area. I think
There's
so. I
a
think
lot
I've
of
only been
Spanish
there
history
twice.
there. See, I'm tying it
Indeed.
back in. A lot
Yes,
of
there you go.
Spanish history in Louisiana. So, okay, so how many countries? Do you have like a list of things that you're doing?
Yeah,
Like,
in terms of
yeah,
how many I've been to already,
yeah. How many? Do you have like a serious bucket
it's
list beyond
it's
what
well,
your listeners say
where
what to
I'm
do?
going to is still up in the air. My goal is that when I die, I've been to more countries than I have years of age.
Ah, I like
So,
that.
and
That's awesome.
my dad just passed away. Well, my mother also actually this year,
Oh, sorry.
within 2024. He
Mm,
was 97 and she was 96. So I figure I need to try and get to 100 countries if I'm going to be successful with
yeah.
that. Um,
101. Push it one more.
well, we'll see,
Just
we'll
one
see.
more. Come on.
But I've been to about 73 or so far. So
And is history a main focus? It seems like you got
It
that
is.
part.
It's certainly one of the focuses at this point because every place has history. That's not hard to
Yeah.
find. But I've also really enjoyed, for instance, some of the wildlife safaris I've been in Africa. Want to love to get
Mhm.
back there. Once you've been on
Oh, you're
running
never
after
done.
a group of wild dogs as they go on a hunt.
You got to see the Cape dogs, the wild
The
dogs.
wild dogs, yeah,
That's
it's a
fantastic.
fascinating experience. So
That's wild. That's like that.
yeah,
You're lucky when you get to see them because not
oh,
everyone
very
gets
much
to see
so.
them.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you got to do that. What country were you in?
That was in Botswana in the Okavango Delta.
I haven't done that yet. Well, we've crossed over. We put our boots over there, but then we haven't done that. We were in South Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, all of that. And
Uh-huh.
I think, as a child, I was very lucky to be in the big, migration of the wildebeest and the Serengeti.
Oh, yeah.
I
That's
mean
also
that,
something.
and that was yeah, I was so young in the late 70s. And so I was, I think, very, very, very blessed and lucky to be able to experience these amazing,
Yeah.
creatures and how you see them cross over and you're surrounded, So have
Yeah.
you had that chance? Because
Yeah,
if you
no,
can do that,
had a chance to do that in the
oh,
Ngorongoro.
oh,
So,
you went to Ngorongoro. Oh,
yeah. So,
oh,
pretty
wow.
amazing.
Well, we've been around the world a little bit today. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Where's your next country?
Cuba.
Cuba, that's right. Okay, I always think that's still America to me. Beyond?
No.
I know it's not America. I know, but it's just close. Do you have one beyond that?
No, I'm not
Because you
sure
did
when
Turkey, which I can't pronounce now. It's Turkey, Turkey,
Turkey.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
that's
I had been to
amazing.
Turkey before, but I picked up four other new countries just the week prior to that to Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Kosovo.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so I
Yeah.
still
And
have three countries in the Balkans I haven't been to, and
okay.
haven't been to the Caucasus, haven't been to most of Africa still. There are a lot of countries in Africa. So
Yeah,
haven't been
I
to the
think
stands. So
yeah, it's never ending. I even feel
yeah.
that way about this country as we travel it and we travel full time now, but it's every time you go to a new place, I feel like we have more connection with people,
Mhm.
and the natural world and understanding people because you have to understand. This is why I love what you love history is because I think we have more understanding once we start to understand the kind of
Sure.
where people have come from. You can't just take it for right now, as though I know we all talk about living in the present moment and all that, but if you start to understand why someone is how they are, what they cook, what they do,
Yeah.
it comes from the past and we understand that more. Do you feel that when you travel?
Oh, you talk about going to Africa, for instance. I have been known to say with Tanzania in particular that you go for the wildlife and you go back for the people. That, just thoroughly enjoyed getting to know some of the
Oh,
people
yeah.
there. I was there on volunteer trip the first time
Mm.
I was there. And so we did 3 days of safari, but the rest of the time we were just with people. We were working with a church that was caring for orphans of AIDS.
Oh,
Um,
wow, wow,
so it
yeah.
was a fascinating experience up in near basically on the foothills of Kilimanjaro. Was where the particular church was that we were dealing with. I was also just amazed. It felt like any three Tanzanias could break into four-part harmony. So
Right?
the
I
music and the
know.
culture there was just fascinating. Just
I'm
loved
always
it.
trying to tell people about the singing. The singing is just so amazing, and the
It
drums
is.
and it
I
is powerful, and the smiles.
Oh
That
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a resiliency of the people of Africa that is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
amazing to me. Wow.
Zimbabwe was one of those places where it's got 90% unemployment. I don't know how it
Mm.
works as a country. I honestly don't understand how it holds together. It's had just decades of mismanagement, and but you just love the Zimbabwe people, and it's a tough place in terms of economically what's
Yeah.
happened there, what's going on there, but just amazing people.
A lot of people that I know from Zimbabwe all moved to South Africa.
Yeah,
And, there's a lot of movement. Everyone
sure,
talks
yeah,
about what's going on in this country, but it's the same thing over there. People are always, moving, and you've got to think Africa was mostly, farming and hunting and living off of the land. So
sure.
it's not necessarily city-like. So it's like a change in a way of life for sure. I mean, when I
Sure.
was
Yeah.
growing up in Kenya, that's what it was. People were not used to everything that was, westernized, and it doesn't mean that westernized is necessarily always good either. So it's kind of this
Right.
interesting balance of getting, oh, they know how to do the land better. Barbara Kingsolver wrote an amazing novel called Poisonwood Bible, and it talks about a priest or preacher going to the Congo area with his family, and they were arguing with the African people that have been growing things there for years about how to grow things. And eventually they had to succumb to the way of the land because it was different than America. It was different, and they had to do things. And in fact, I remember learning how to garden from them,
Yeah.
the same way. I was reading this book going, oh my gosh, I learned how to garden that way. And then when I got here, everybody told me I was wrong. And I'm going, no, I'm not wrong. But so it's really funny. So I think that's the beauty of travel. We learn a lot.
When I was in South Africa with the amateur traveler trip that
Mm.
we did there, we did an overland trip from Johannesburg, from Joburg up to Victoria Falls through
Oh,
Botswana
nice.
and Zimbabwe. And one of our stops, this was an Intrepid travel trip. They were the ones who were doing the logistics
Mm.
behind it.
Nice, nice.
I was not the guide. I was just the organizer. We stopped at a farm where they were reintroducing the African cattle
Mm.
because when the Europeans came, they were like, what is this rubbish cattle that you've got? You need our cattle. Well, the African cattle, one can defend itself from predators because it's longhorn cattle. It's quite impressive cattle, and then also it's more resistant to the diseases. So it was
Hmm.
much better adapted for that than the European cattle that they brought in. And so now they're reintroducing that, getting kind of back to the African roots, as it were. But
Yeah,
yeah, no,
that's awesome.
it's been interesting to have the opportunity to go places where most off the beaten track that I've been was again with an amateur traveler trip in southern Morocco. We ran
Oh, I want to do that.
across a couple they were out in the Sahara, not in the dunes area, not what picturing, but in the acacia
Right.
trees, and they had their
Oh,
goats and they
yeah.
had their mini bike. They had a fairly ramshackle tent there, and we stopped, and our guide said, we have a group of tourists here. Could they talk to you? And they said, sure. And he was Berber, so he could translate for us. And at one point, he said to the woman, well, they're from America. She got a completely blank look on her face. And he said, well, it's the other side of the ocean. And she went, ah, I've heard of the ocean.
Well,
Never
yes.
heard of the US. Not at all. We were just not
Wow.
on her radar at all. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we lived
Not
in
important
Kenya.
to her.
No, not totally. I mean, that's why I was saying we're at different places in
Yeah.
in life and growth, and when we were in Kenya, you did have to have maids and housekeepers and things like that as
Uh-huh.
people living there outside of the country and everything. And if you didn't, they would let you know, and you would basically, no matter what, you're going to do it. And it wasn't about anything negative. It was just, yeah, okay. And we were going on a vacation to Mombasa, and
Mhm.
we thought, as good Americans, we'll take our housekeeper with us because she's never seen the ocean. That was politically incorrect and wrong to do to anybody at that time. It was the wrong thing to do. You couldn't get her a hotel room. It was like a no. It was, and then because they have servants' quarters, what they called there, that was a no. And then when she did see the ocean, it scared the absolute heck out of her. She was just absolutely, she kept grabbing my mom's hand and going, Madam, no, no, this is big, and it was because they couldn't fathom, if they haven't seen it and not seen it in books or our kind of literature,
Mhm.
it was a whole other deal. And so taking her on the vacation to the coast was, we thought we were doing the right thing. It was not the right thing, but it was, because eventually she didn't know about the ocean and lightened up, but politically or culturally put her
Mhm.
in a very difficult spot, which we didn't understand as being very naive human beings. I was a kid. I'm not part of that. She was just the coolest. She was one of the coolest people in my life, though. But thank you so much for a fun conversation.
Oh,
I
you're
love
welcome.
that you allowed us to derail and go around the world. That's cool. Everyone, amateurtraveler.com. When do all your episodes come out? Tell everybody
On
about that part.
7 a.m. Saturday morning Pacific time
Okay,
every
every
week.
Saturday. New ones there, of course, and on all platforms. I know you're on all platforms. Mostly
Yep.
Apple is your main thing, right? Apple is
Only because it's where most people get podcasts through, not for any particularly good reasons. You can find
yeah,
me on Spotify as well, and
yep.
Amazon and every place else.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, everyone go to IFWTWA, which spells IFTWA. So IFWTWA.org to learn more about the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. I've got links in the episode notes for Chris's articles, his blogs, and podcasts about Mallorca so that you can plan your trip there, especially if you want to go January, February, or anytime. So thanks so much, Chris.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Food, Wine, and Travel Show featuring members of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. We encourage you to visit their website. We say IFTWA, which is IFWTWA.org. You can also follow us at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels, everyone.